So now we want to talk about how to write an effective letter to the editor. And there are several points along the road that we want to discuss here. First is you need to be aware of your goal and your values in writing a letter. The goal here is to plant the seeds of liberty. With a letter, you can reach a wide audience. Sometimes you can reach a very wide audience with the larger newspapers. You can find fellow travelers. A lot of times people have written me or I've written someone else. If you read their letter and you like it, you might correspond with them in email. You can succinctly communicate brief arguments using argument, logic, and evidence to persuade the mass audience. Of course, you can also develop your skills writing and your reputation. So you can develop a good or a bad reputation, so be careful, keep this in mind. What you cannot do is make comprehensive arguments or use exhaustive evidence in making your case to the public in a letter. One letter cannot change the world. You're not going to write that magic bullet letter that's going to change the whole culture, right? That's not what a letter is. But instead, many letters can be part of a broader campaign for liberty, individual rights, free markets. So next, you have to be on the lookout for opportunities to write a good letter. So I would recommend that you read at least one publication regularly. So in Denver, you might read the Denver Daily or the Denver Post or both. In Colorado Springs, it would be the Gazette. In Fort Collins, it's Colorado. And so read your regional paper, I would suggest, as your primary publication in terms of looking for opportunities to write letters. There's a way of, you can train your subconscious. You can basically command or give a direction to your subconscious to be on the lookout for opportunities. I've heard this described as giving yourself a standing order, right? So every day you're looking through a publication, looking for these opportunities. You can look for misleading claims or simply false claims. You can look for bad arguments, logical fallacies. You can look for biases. You can look for false premises that they're relying on in their arguments. Another thing that a lot of people overlook is to look for good articles that are making a good argument and advocating liberty. And it's a good idea to write in a letter to buttress those arguments, praise the person, because we can't just criticize what's bad out there, right? We have to promote what's good. So look what's good out there in the culture and try to promote that also in your activism. So how do you pick a topic? You will have already been looking for opportunities, right? So you'll be aware, you'll probably have some article in mind that you're going to be responding to. So you're halfway there. A topic should be timely, right? It should be a hot current event. Sometimes you can pick a peculiar, like a surprising event that may not be at the top of the current discussion, but you have an intriguing angle on it, so that can be fine. It should be of generally wide interest, not something that only 1% of the readership is going to care about. You should write a letter generally in response to an appropriate publication, the Denver Post or some other newspaper. Now, of course, there's a big paper, little paper trade-off, right? If you submit a letter to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, USA Today, your potential audience is much, much greater, but your chances of getting published are much, much smaller. So keep that in mind, because they get many, many times the number of submissions. So that's one trade-off. There's also a trade-off in length versus potential of getting published. If you want to write a really robust letter that's 300 words long, that's great, depending on the publication, but the longer it is, the lower your chances of getting published. So often it's better to do something really short and increase your chances of getting it in print. And in a letter, you should be able to facilitate some fundamental discussion. Let's really get to the principles of liberty. If you're going to spend the time to write a letter, don't talk out on the periphery of the matter. Talk about something that's really important, or relate the issue at hand to the more fundamental principles. So, once you have in mind what you're going to write about, how do you get ready to write your letter? If you're responding to an article, which is typically the case, obviously you want to read the text carefully and understand the arguments that the article is making. Do two things before you start. Put yourself in the shoes of the editor. What is the editor looking for in a letter? What's the editor trying to do in publishing letters? The goal is to generate community discussion so that the editor can sell more newspapers, right? That's the basic goal of an editor, to sell more newspapers. So you want your letter to facilitate the editor's goal if you want a better chance of getting published. Also, put yourself in the shoes of the typical reader. Readers do not want jargon. They do not want you to waste their time. They're usually in a hurry. Most readers aren't going to read most of the letters. They might glance at a letter. If you can catch their attention right away, then they might actually read your whole letter. So consider the needs of your typical reader who's usually in a hurry. Pick your angle, especially longer articles are going to have many possible topics to respond to. You're probably not going to have space to pick each one of those topics. So narrow your focus. You may have to do some amount of research. You may have to read some other more technical articles to get for background. So once you have generally in mind what you want to write, one good generic strategy is to write a laundry list of all your potential ideas, just on a sheet of paper with a pen. You may, not in any particular order, they may not make it in the letter, or they may make it in the letter. So this is basically your brainstorming period. Just get everything on paper that may be of interest. And then once you have kind of your ideas on paper, you can start to prune the points, get rid of the things that seem tangential or not as important. You can start to organize them into your simple outline. So now you're ready to actually sit down, bang out your letter. Check the submission requirements. If your newspaper limits letters to 150 words, you shouldn't sit down with the goal of writing 800 words. You're just on the wrong track in terms of getting your letter started. Focus on making the letter self-contained. You want the reader to be able to understand what you're talking about, even if they have not read the previous article. Once you're ready to write a letter, just sit down and bang it out. Don't try to self-edit at the point of writing very much at all. Right? Your goal is just, at this point, just to get the words on the paper. Editing comes later. Right? So there's two distinct steps. You're basically just flowing the words out of your head as fast as you can onto your paper or onto the computer screen. And then after you've done that, then you will come back to it and edit. So do edit for wordiness, spelling, and grammar. Check the formatting again to make it appropriate for your paper. This is a key step that most people forget. Have somebody else you trust proofread your letter, especially if you have fewer than, say, 10 letters published. If you have somebody else read your letter, they're going to catch simple things like spelling and grammar errors, but they're also going to catch the big ideas like, are you really catching the thrust of the article that you're responding to? Are you making any big sorts of logical errors in your letter? It's really easy to, in the heat of the moment, to type something out and send it off in a hurry. This can really come back to haunt you, because then you'll either have to pull it because you're not happy with it being published, which is not, you don't want to build that reputation with editors, because then they're looking, they might mentally tag you as being a problem. Or you might get it published and it may not be something you're happy with, right? So really it's important as you get going to have somebody else critically review your letter. Edit again. Try your best to get rid of any excess word that you can. I mean, the shorter the better, right? All other things equal, the shorter the letter, the better. And then finally, double check the requirements for the publication in question. And then send it in. Send it in with the text in the body of the email. Do not send it as an attachment. Right? Send it with your name, address, telephone number, because at least the larger publications will call you to verify that you're the author and that you indeed want it published.